Hello, Matches Thrive Nation. More and more, we are seeing gut imbalances, gut pain, gut disturbances, bloating, cramping, distension, and we need more gut specialists. And that's why it's a privilege to have Josh Dech on the show. He's an IBD specialist, he's a holistic nutritionist, he's a medical lecturer, he's a physician consultant, he's an ex-paramedic, and he's a scientific strategist for discovering the root causes of Crohn's and colitis and these autoimmune conditions that are exponentially increasing. My life as a physician over the last 26 years, I've never seen autoimmune just absolutely skyrocket like it is. And so, welcome to the show, Josh.
It's a pleasure to be here, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. And that
Ah,
was quite an
pleasure.
introduction. There's every title under the sun.
It's every title, and we'll put links to your Instagram. Listen up, the Instagram channel that Josh has got is incredible and just informative. And we are trying to educate and bring awareness to people more and more because, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, Western medicine doesn't often have good answers to chronic stomach issues, chronic gastric issues, and it's starting young. And I'm sure you've seen that as well. I'm getting 5-year-olds in the practice, I'm getting 7-year-olds in the practice, even younger, and it's causing significant issues. But give us what's the state of the nation, or the US or Canada or the world. I don't know what stats and I'm pretty sure they're same as sort of Western living here in South Africa. Is what's happening with sort of gastric disease, with IBS, with IBD, with Crohn's, colitis. What are the stats
Yeah.
out there?
It is shockingly on the rise. So when we start at kind of the base level, we look at everybody who's got gut issues. And I can pull the US stats, which you're right, they're very much trending across the world. One of the reasons the US is far worse is because of the additives, the pesticides, the chemicals, the toxins in homes. It's just not a sustainable way to live, but it's very profitable for the country,
Mm,
right? 18% of the entire GDP of the USA is just from sickness.
sure.
It's involved 18%, makes it's $4.7 trillion a year.
Mm,
And that's only going to be comprised of hospital visits and doctors, health insurance, and pharmaceuticals. Makes up 18% of the country's income, which
sure.
is unbelievable. It's like 2 to 3% in any other country in the world. So we're seeing a huge rise of what these diseases are doing. And in the US alone, in Canada, again, it's trending the same way. Up to 70% of the population has some kind of gut issue they complain about once a week. So gas, bloat, pain, constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, cramping, nausea, vomiting,
Mm,
something along that line. But then we take it a step further. We look at bowel disease, for instance. In North America, I say it's the hub of the world. The USA and Canada combined are less than 5% of the global population. They have more than 50%, depends on the stats you look at, but 50% or more of the world's cases of Crohn's and colitis, which are, of course, very severe bowel diseases
mm.
with inflammation, pain, weight loss, bleeding, cancer risk, infections, the works. So we have an epidemic on our hands in this side of the world, and it's trending everywhere else in the world as well as our environments around us become less and less compatible with our biology. And so we've seen a rise, all in all, of cases going from about 15 per 100,000 population, again on this side of the world, to about 463. So that's a 3,000% increase in 75 years.
Wow.
And right, with you think with the advances in medicine and healthcare and spending more money per capita than any other country on earth, that we would see a trend of people getting healthier and getting better. But life expectancy is going down, diseases are going up, but ultimately profits are also going up.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy those stats, and it just seems like that is going to carry on exponentially increasing. Are you still seeing younger and younger, clients coming to you? I just cannot believe the plethora of children that are having gut issues.
Yeah. It used to be what we call an old person's disease, 60s, 70s, 80s, you start having bowel problems. Then we started seeing it in middle age, 30, 40, 50. I've got children as young as 6 months coming with their parents to the practice and they're saying, "Hey, my baby's bleeding. I don't know why." It's devastating.
Wow.
And the worst of the worst tends to be in children. And
Mm.
we're still trying to figure out exactly why that is, but there's a combination of factors I believe that are contributing to it that are fairly predictable.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's talk about two. I was listening to your podcast and well done on that. It's pretty incredible. But I
Thank
think
you.
what's really good for a relatable aspect is you spoke about Billie Jean, and that's not the actual person's patient's, name, and you're not giving away any of their
Oh, that
sort
is
of
her real name. Yeah,
identity.
she made it public. That is her
Oh,
real name.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
And then Larissa as well. So
That's
maybe
right.
just talk like just, I think people will say, oh my goodness, that's me. So that archetype or that avatar can be really helpful for people to, grab hold of.
Yeah, I'd love to. So let's start with Larissa. Absolutely incredible story. She was diagnosed with severe ulcerative colitis back in 2013, and her doctors kept wanting to remove her colon. They said it's your only option, right? The idea is that these diseases are genetic, autoimmune, and there's really no known cause, which we've proven time and time again to be false. And I'd love to get there with you. But she came in diagnosed in 2013. She was dealing with all these issues, chronic bleeding. She described the pain like squirrels with razor blades attached to their feet running around on her insides.
Wow.
Just chronic. In fact, when I do a first phone consult to say, hey, let's figure out what's going on, where the root cause is, can I help you? And then we can decide if we're going to do a protocol or program with you. That first call she and I had, she was in the bathroom. After about 5, 8 minutes, she couldn't hold it. So we took a call with her on the toilet. And this happens more often than you might think because of the level of urgency. Every bowel movement met with blood, chronic fatigue, extreme depression. And her words, she says, A, my option is to move a TV into the bathroom and just live there. Or B, is just to not be on this planet anymore. She says there's no quality of life to live. And that's devastating when you can't do anything. You're gaining weight or you're depressed. You can't sleep. Like your body just feels like it's falling apart and everything your doctors try doesn't work. Well, she joined one of our protocols and she's working with us here on the team. And after 4 months, and this is, I don't want to say this like everybody can do it, but this is the gold standard of what we'd like to see. After 4 months, she went from full of ulcers in her colon, spontaneous bleeding, pain, nausea, vomiting, the works. And by the time she was done a 16-week protocol, her colonoscopy was almost perfect and symptoms were about 90-95% relieved.
Wow, that's
Because we identified the root causes that the doctor said didn't exist. And that's what's possible.
yeah. All right, and what about Billie Jean? A different story.
Yeah. Billie Jean also ulcerative colitis. We see about 70% colitis and 30% Crohn's, but she was also ulcerative colitis. And same thing. She had 15 years she was dealing with this, and she was
Mm.
actually a nurse. And so she talked to all the doctors. She did everything she could from the inside. And they said, again, it's autoimmune, it's genetic. There's nothing we can do. And so the same thing, they put her on all the drugs, the medications. She was on an immunosuppressive drug called Entyvio. And after all these years, however long she was on it, one of the side effects that she developed was skin cancer. And so she'd get one little spot, melanoma would come up. She'd go to the doctor's office. They'd, freeze it, cut it out, give her a quick skin. She'd be fine.
Mm.
They kept coming up and coming up. She went in one day with nearly 30 spots of skin cancer all over her body. They said, we can't keep cutting these. Like, we have to do chemo. And so she went through this whole process and skin cancer kept coming up because of the drug she was on and what was inflaming her body. So I started working with her and it was probably 8 weeks in, her symptoms were reduced by about 75%. She was feeling good. She was starting to have more energy back. She was losing weight, which for her was a good thing. Hair was starting to grow back. She was sleeping really great. Everything was looking good. But then she started developing hives and rashes and things came up. So we knew her immune system was starting to pivot. See, her original root cause was mold. She had mold in the home, mycotoxin exposure, which leads to dysfunction of your immune system, inflammation of mucosal surfaces, which again you have in your bowel. It led to overgrowth of microbes and invasions of parasites. And at about that 8, 10 week mark, she started getting hives and rashes. And I took a look with the team and we said, well, we think she's developing, like she's showing signs of parasites now. That's one of the next layers of what she's got going on. And so we pivoted to parasites. She started getting better again. And after about 9 months, it took her, but we're talking 15 years of drugs, 9 months, cancer free, bowel disease free, colonoscopies are perfectly clear, no signs of disease. Her blood looks perfect. She is what we would call, if we didn't have this dogma around this disease being, quote, incurable and just in remission, one would be inclined to call it a cure. Right now, I can't legally say that in the terms of what we do, cure, treat, or heal. But what I can say is this. If your symptoms go away with no sign of returning, all these years down the road, it's gone. Clinically, histologically, medically speaking, symptomatically. At what point do we stop calling it remission and start calling it a cure?
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And at the end of the day, you guys are listening out there. And I'll say it is, there really is a cure for colitis and, Crohn's. And I think that's important for people to understand. And we've got to challenge the status quo. And yes, there are ethical guidelines that we've got to adhere to, but people got to be empowered with to take accountability of their health. And I know that you speak about the three sort of, the foundations of toxins, deficiencies, and microbes. Take us through that framework because I think many people don't understand how that impacts their gastric health or their stomach health.
I'd love to. Thank you, Steve. That's such a great segue here. Here's the thing. Human beings only get sick for three reasons that I've distilled it down to in my career. Now, this is excluding getting hit by a bus, right? 'Cause that's
Yeah.
a physical trauma. But the reason we get ill, any disease, but particularly bowel disease, the first one is going to be some kind of toxin. Toxins can be anything from pesticides to heavy metals to chronic stress. Chronically high blood sugar can be a toxin to the body, right? VOCs, formaldehydes, food preservatives, additives, chemicals, all these
Mm.
things can be toxic. Alcohol, you name it. They're toxic to your body. It causes inflammation. It's something you have to get rid of, but that alters the state of your chemistry. That's a toxin. The second thing we tend to see is some kind of deficiency. And these are basic things like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, nutrients, right? Also, fresh air, exercise, sunlight, things that we need for our bodies to thrive. The third reason we get sick is due to some kind of microbial infection or overgrowth, or arguably an undergrowth. This is going to involve your bacteria, fungus, parasites, and even viruses. And that's an interesting conversation if you believe viruses exist or
Mm.
not. But the idea being it's an imbalance or an overgrowth or undergrowth of certain microbes that make way or leave way for other infections to come in.
Mm.
And these things all interact with each other, right? Certain microbes and overgrowths of bacteria or fungus produce toxins. And that strain on the system also burns through nutrients, leaving you more deficient, which leaves you more susceptible to those microbial infections, and the cycle continues. And all these three things, it's very incestuous, where they continue to make you sick. And if we can figure out what combination of these three things you have, it just happens to be the two stories you brought up, Larissa and Billie Jean, both were mold and parasites. But those are probably two of the most common things I see in my practice. About 80 to 90% have some kind of layer of mold, parasites, or other fungus like candida. It's extremely common. We just have to figure out how did it get here? What was the chain of events that led to these infections? And how do we really reverse that to repair the residual damage and get your body back to a healing state?
Well, let's go through those two examples because I think it's important. Mold and parasites. Do you have a protocol? Are you using functional medicine? Are you using assessments? Are you using herbals? How does it work from your perspective in your clinic?
Well, the first thing we have to do is to establish how that got there, right? So here's a great case. We'll go to a third one as just an example. It's not necessarily that the home is moldy per se. Sometimes it's a workplace, a school. Often, like 70% of US homes have a mold problem. And
Sure.
we know per the CDC, up to 40% of asthma cases are attributed to mold. So we can see the interaction here. But I have a client I recently just brought on, like yesterday, I believe, at the time of this recording. And she had come in back in her early teens, late teens. She was dealing with a lot of eating disorders, a very disturbed, disrupted home. She developed anorexia and bulimia, which disrupts, again, stress. It disrupts that gut brain connection, the vagal tone, which leads to motility issues, which lead to hyperfermentation and overgrowth of microbes, which damage your gut lining. And a damaged gut lining is one of the three pillars of autoimmune disease. And as things started to go on, she was traveling, got infections, was on antibiotics, and all these things compounded to damage the gut brain connection, the motility or the speed at which things move through her bowels, which, like an assembly line, if you screw up the timing anywhere, everything goes to hell. And so this compound led to her issues. So it's identifying your roots. And so with Billie Jean, for example, we sat down and we looked at her, and she had done parasite testing. But keep in mind that parasite testing is very inaccurate. I estimate most average physicians' offices are 90 to 99% inaccurate, but even the best parasite testing we can get is estimated to be about 40% accurate. And so what we did, we have to look at symptoms. We have to look at the blood because blood work beyond what your doctor's reference range is, but functional
Mm.
blood chemistry, we can identify what's high, what's low, where are your ratios. I mean, your doctor says, oh, eosinophils are a little bit high, for example. Well, maybe your body's dealing with a chronic infection or there's something going on. Well, in functional blood chemistry, eosinophils is one of many markers you can look at that about 30% of those with a parasite infection will have elevated levels of this white blood cell. And so we can look at that combined with other symptoms to identify if there's a parasitic infection. Things like classic signs like psoriasis, eczema, seasonal issues, seasonal allergies or sinus issues. If you're somebody who your symptoms of your bowels get worse, like just 1 or 2 weeks out of a month, they come up randomly and they come back down, or it's in line with your menstrual cycle or the full moon. These are clinical or classic signs of parasitic infections. If you've got pain when you palpate or press on your liver or your appendix, if you've got trouble digesting fats, oily, greasy stools, for example, if you've had your appendix or gallbladder removed, early signs of hair loss or early menopause, these are all symptoms that in context can point to a parasitic infection. And Billie Jean had many of these. So we said, okay, we got parasites. What else is going on? So we identified again some other neurological stuff, light sensitivities, headaches, migraines, mood issues she was dealing with, all kinds of stuff, plus her blood work. Came back, we said, we think you also have a mold infection. So because parasite testing is not super accurate, we skipped that, said we probably think it's there anyway. We ran a urine test. We tested for mycotoxins, and she came back with 6 or 7 different strains of positive mold, which are infectious. So we figured the mold in the home probably set the stage for parasites to invade, which also set the stage for inflammation and what we call the terrain, like almost like the soil in a garden. If it's salted and it's messy, you're going to grow bad stuff. And so, of course, we looked at the terrain. We said the mold came in, messed things up, led to fungus, led to overgrowth, led to inflammation, immune compromise, led to parasitic infections, led to A, B, C, D. And we walked through this process with her. And once we knew effectively what filled her cup, so to speak, we could then figure out what order this cup got filled based on your history. Well, I started with menstrual issues, and then I had anxiety, and then I had constipation, then it changed to diarrhea, and then I started developing allergies, and then my sinuses, and then we can build a timeline. So we can reverse engineer and figure out what filled this cup, in what order, number one. Number two, we have to ask the question, why isn't her cup emptying or draining like your cup or my cup would? The third thing is, now that that cup is overflowed, what else has gotten wet? What other systems in your body have been compromised that now need to be corrected? Drainage and detox pathways, lymphatics, immune system, gut lining, microbiome, all these things. Once we can establish this timeline, then we can reverse it and figure out, okay, we know it's not autoimmune, genetic, or random, and they're predictable patterns. So the question we have to ask then is, what is your order to emptying your cup?
So very powerful and well said. What a framework. So then once you've addressed it, then do you start working on detox pathways and start looking at diet and nutrition?
Yeah, amazing question. Let's talk about detox pathways and nutrition. First of all, nutrition. Most of the people who come to see us have tried everything. I have had the occasion where they're eating fast food 4 times a week and binge drinking 2 to 3 nights a week. I'm like, let's start there and see what's still hurting in your body. Let's take, it's like IT, like my computer's broken. Like, did you turn off the power? Right. So start with the basic. But my rules, I got 3 rules when it comes down to feeding IBD. Number one, it's whole foods. So foods that walk, swim, fly, grow on the land, in a tree, in a bush, in the sea. God forbid it's food that crawls. I don't judge. But that's my first. It's whole foods that your great-great-grandmother would recognize and go, oh, that's a food I could eat. The second thing we have to look at is going to be tolerable foods. I get people all the time say, well, Josh said whole foods and I tried broccoli. It's bad for me. So Josh is wrong. I'm like, use your head. If it's not a tolerable food, don't eat it. Right. The third rule I have is low histamine foods. And this is for a very particular reason. IBD, Crohn's colitis, has a tendency to be dominant in particular immune pathways or to have deficiencies in immune pathways. Particularly, we call these Th1, Th2, Th9 sometimes, and even Th17. But 9 and 17, 2 and 17 seem to be implicated a lot in bowel disease. Well, this pathway, Th2, if you think about your immune system like an octopus, right, each pathway does a different thing. This arm we label Th2 is also responsible for histamine production. So allergies, rashes, hives, right? These things, sinus issues. And so if Th2 is already dominant, your cup for histamines is already full. So when you eat high histamine foods like ferments, cured meats, yogurts, you could be eating your kimchis and sauerkrauts, kombuchas, all these high histamine foods, canned foods, spinach, even avocados and some cashews. They're high in histamine, so they fill your cup. Larissa, great story, right? Felt like squirrels with razor blades were running around inside of her bowel. So what did we do? We pulled histamines from her diet, and suddenly she started feeling better almost immediately, because bone broth is good for your gut, but it was bad for her gut. And it was actually one of the team members she was working with here at the Gut Health Solution who said, we need to pull this. And she did. And she started feeling better immediately. Wow. Because we were no longer overflowing her cups. Those are my 3 rules I have with diet.
Incredible, incredible rules. Maybe also just at this frame, because people might have not sort of understand how it works between IBD and IBS, and then, looking at Crohn's and colitis, and just give us a bit of a frame. It's been good to talk about Billie Jean, good to talk about Larissa so that people can grab hold of that, and now your rules. But how do they sort of fit together? Because someone's thinking, well, do I have IBS or IBD, or do I have Crohn's, do I have colitis, or just do I have a sore stomach?
Those are an amazing question. Here's what I'll tell you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what name we give it. I think this idea that once we can give a diagnosis, it somehow gives us power or control or even an explanation. But if you think about it, no matter what you're doing, you're going to your doctor and they're looking to give it a title. They're saying, well, you have this condition because I've checked the box on the symptoms. You have diarrhea, you have the bleeding, you have this, you have that. Therefore, this is the name we give it, which means I'm going to give you this drug in this order. And if it
Mm,
doesn't work, we can cut out your bowel or do surgery. That's crazy. This diagnosis tells me what is going on, where it's happening,
mm,
but by no means does a diagnostic tool or a diagnosis of any kind tell you why it's
mm,
happening, which is the most important part of recovery and healing. So you go to your doctor and get a colonoscopy. Okay, well, unless you're screening for cancers and there's other
mm,
ways to do that, in my opinion, why bother? You know you're inflamed. You can tell me how bad it feels, right? Especially if you're not medicated. You know you're inflamed. You know how severe it is. You know where it is because you can feel the pain on palpation or just regularly. Why do I care? I need to know why it's happening. And those tools do nothing to answer those questions.
mm,
And so for me, I look at IBS to IBD as being on a spectrum of severity. And this is really what I think opened the door. Now, I get a lot of flack for this. I've actually been banned from Reddit communities and all kinds for having a different idea, but guess who's getting healthy and guess who's
mm,
not? So here's the idea. If we look at this progression of wear and tear, kind of like wearing a pair of shoes without socks, and the idea being you go for a walk and that heel starts to rub and it gets red until it blisters and bleeds. It's a progression. Now, if we look at bowel issues, about 20%, again, I'll use North America, 20% have a diagnosis of IBS. So we have an active diagnosis. 70% or up to have IBS type conditions. So constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloat, pain, nausea, vomiting, whatever.
mm.
So we could arguably say that up to 70% have IBS, which again is 500% higher than it would have been 50 years ago per the data, give or take. So we know that IBS is getting worse. At the same time, IBD is getting worse. And 17 to 20% of those who have Crohn's colitis also have a previous diagnosis of IBS. Now, the argument is, oh, we misdiagnosed. It was IBD the whole time. My argument is it was IBS till that tissue started to wear and tear, just like the heel in a shoe, until it got bad enough to get this diagnosis. Had you done early intervention and identified your root cause, this could have been prevented entirely.
Yeah.
And so I look at them on a spectrum, and someone might be listening going, well, no, Steve, I got overnight, I started bleeding. That can happen, right? How fast can a blister form in a shoe? It depends on how tight the shoe is, if the shoe is wet, if you're wearing socks or not, if there's glass or sand or rocks in your shoe. All these things will determine how quickly that foot starts to bleed. Same thing
Yeah.
with IBD. How quickly does this wear and tear happen or almost overnight? That can happen. But if we understand it's a spectrum of severity, that it has a root cause, suddenly, and I can go through the actual data with you, we
Mm.
know it's not autoimmune, it's not genetic, and it's not random. Once you understand that, you stop looking to medication to manage your symptoms for life. You start looking for a route to fix it.
Yeah, very powerful. And for those listening, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and IBD, irritable bowel disorder. So it's a spectrum, and I think that's well said. There's often red flags that go up, but because of this modern day life, we don't make the changes. So let's go on to how your detox pathways. Are you using, binders, zeolites, the bentonites? Are you using infrared sauna, or, using chelation therapy? What is your process from a detox perspective?
It's an awesome question. I think something that's often mistaken in the world of IBD, so your Crohn's colitis especially, even IBS or any detox, is that we go to detox right away.
Mm,
And that's what makes people very, very sick. So your cup is already full. If you think of it this way, if I got a cup full of water, Steve, and I drop a penny in the bottom, if I want to remove that penny without spilling, what do I have to do? I have to empty the cup. If I reach my hand into a cup full of water, that water spills and goes everywhere. That's a detox reaction we call a Herxheimer reaction, where you get very, very sick. And so what happens is so many people want to detox, but instead, let's back it up. What is detoxing? Right? It's the neutralization of toxins in the body. It's the reconfiguring or construction for your body to be able to get them out. In short term, detoxing is collecting the trash. Drainage is bringing it out to the curb. And so oftentimes we try to detox without having proper drainage. And if you try to take garbage out of your house, but the doors are locked and the living room is full of trash, you can't get to the front door, what do? You put it in a different room. Your body will just move these toxins around and they settle into neurological tissue or into your gut or into your joints or into your head. And you're like, oh, I got a headache. I'm feeling sick because you move the toxins around because they couldn't get out. So before I even look to detox, we have to open drainage. These are your exit doors in the body. Now, there are 7 primary exit doors, how things move around and get out of your body. The first I see most congested in bowel disease is liver and gallbladder with the bile ducts. That's going to be your first 2. The next one we typically see is going to be lymphatics. Right? This is how things, again, move around the body. So liver, gallbladder, and bile ducts. You have your lymphatic system. That's another exit door. Then, of course, you have your bowels. You have your kidneys. You have your sinuses. You have your skin. Is that 7? That's 7. There we go. So that's your 7 detox pathways. That's how, or your exit doors rather, for drainage. You can sweat to get things out your skin. You physically move to move things through your lymphatic system. You pee and poop to get things through bowels and kidneys. You need open drainage pathways or these these bile ducts throughout your liver, like these little tubes for things to be able to move through. And one of the problems is with bowel disease, especially IBS, any spectrum of gut issues, we have so many toxins that are stuck inside of our liver that are congesting it. So our bile, see, here's the thing, bile is very expensive to make for your body. So about 95% gets recirculated. So your body wants to make sure it's filtering it and cleaning it. Well, if your liver's all congested, everything's toxic, your bowels are inflamed, you're not going to be cleaning your bile. So now you recirculate it, which means you're reabsorbing estrogens and toxins all the time. On the other hand, if you've got parasites, liver flukes, which physically will block these tubes, it's like plugging up your sink at home. Things can't move through. So things get congested and again reabsorbed, and we build up more toxins, and it's filling up your cup. And as that cup continues to fill and overflow, you have more symptoms. So we have to open these drainage pathways, specifically or more particularly in the world of IBS and IBD, is going to be your liver, gallbladder, bile ducts, and lymphatic system are the most common. But if you've got mold issues, that can colonize in the sinuses. If you've got parasites, it can inflame the sinuses. It can colonize in the bowel. Not as common, but it happens. So we have to also remove these toxins from these exit doors. And there's a process to doing that, whether it's through supplementation, castor oil packs, supplements like TUDCA, TUDCA, very powerful supplement for the liver, gallbladder, bile ducts. We've used coffee enemas, for example. There's all kinds of things you can use. Liver support, milk thistle, NAC, hydration, dandelion, burdock, you name it. Lots of supplements and herbs you can use. But we have to go very slow. And you mentioned binders, zeolite, bentonite. I'm a big fan of things like humic and fulvic acid for those who can tolerate it. It improves nutrient absorption. It binds onto toxins both inside the gut and cellularly. But again, if we're going to open these drainage pathways, we have to start slowly. And then if you're taking too many binders, again, you can make yourself sick by detoxing too quickly. So this is where we have to titrate and go very, very slow. I recommend supervision, but some people will prefer to do it themselves against advice, and that's fine, but have to go slow. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. Those who try to sprint end up in the hospital.
Sure. Great summary there in terms of drainage, the exit doors. You're going to make sure that once you start detoxing, it can exit the body. Otherwise, you can clog those pipes, which I don't think is going to work well. Well said. In terms of stress being a toxin, and do you measure heart rate variability? I mean, it's just stress is such a ubiquitous word now, but it seems like we're under such pressure. I've got a 9-year-old, I've got a 21-year-old, and I just look at the pressure that my 9-year-old's under compared to my son when he was 9. It just, how do you manage that part of it? Because obviously that's a huge part of life. And yes, someone can watch their diet and be 80-90% really, really solid with their diet. But this stress has a huge impact in terms of the vagus nerve, impacting the stomach, impacting the gut, impacting, conditions like your colitis and your Crohn's.
Yeah, and this is where the rubber really meets the road on an individual basis. I'd like to say we're all stressed. I used to be under the impression that out of sight, out of mind just
Yeah.
means I'm not that stressed. But we know our tissues hold stress. We know that's a real thing. There's books like Bessel van der Kolk, right? The body keeps the score.
Mm.
That's been identified with Louise Hayes back in what, the 80s, if not earlier. So we know that our bodies will hold on to stress, even though we box it up in our minds. We have to consider our world is no longer compatible with our biology. Not just the chemicals, not just being indoors all the time, not just, the building materials we use that are fake, but we have to consider we're in a world we're under chronic stress nonstop. Going to work, dealing with finances, social media, the news, politics, all these things are chronic subconscious stressors. Whereas thousands of years ago, what would you have to worry about? Finding food, getting home safely, not getting raided at your village, right?
Yeah.
These were acute stressors. So our body would handle this, a big adrenaline dump, cortisol spikes, all these things. But now we have micro doses of these toxins, so to speak, all the time, rather than a mega dose once in a while. And our biology was never designed for this. So we are under chronic stress. So here's the thing. Is chronic stress necessary to manage? Sure. In this client I just recently brought on who went through bulimia and all these things in a tough home life, there's a lot of chronic stress there because that disruption of the vagus nerve, I believe, set off this whole cascade. So that's where we're starting. But someone like Billie Jean or Larissa, who I would say have it relatively under control and have bigger fish to fry, so to speak, if they're not able to do all the breath work and all the management of all the stress stuff that you have to constantly think about, which adds more stress, ironically enough, are there bigger fish to fry in terms of drainage and detoxing and mold in the home and dealing with that? Yes. Is saying, hey, you got mold in your home and your options are three. Number one, you just live in there and deal with it and do the best you can. Number two, you have to move, which nobody likes to do. Three, remediate, which is expensive. That's more stress. I got a client right now, her husband just had a stroke. She's a nutritionist herself, so she understands the basics of this stuff. But her husband just had a stroke. She just tested her home, and it's stage 5, like need to move out for mold all over the place. There's more stress.
Yeah.
But right now for her, what's more important, the mold or the stress management? And
Mm.
can her body get rid of mold and drain or detox properly under stress? And this is where we have to play with it. Is stress the be all end all? No. But is it a very critical factor on a per person basis? Yes. And this is where we have to understand, can you do it all? Should you do some? And it's really up to the provider and the patient or the client to decide, what should I be doing right now for me and my welfare?
Yeah, well said, well said. In terms of hydration, Josh, how much water, what type of water, hydrogen water, not hydrogen water, what are you using? I've got a 5 filtration basis process at home and I've got it structured and that. What is your view there? Because I think that's crucially important if you look at kidneys and just, how hydrated we need to be and not overhydrated. What's your protocol there?
I think it's an awesome question. Water is one of those things that absolutely municipal city tap water is filthy. It's full of chemicals, full of toxins, full of pharmaceuticals that never go away. Think about it. In the USA, what do you got? 300 million plus people on regular uses of pharmaceutical drugs, birth control, antipsychotics. What do? They pee. Where does that go? Into the water system. What do? Filter it the best they can, but they're called forever chemicals for a reason. So we're all basically drinking and utilizing these micro doses of pharmaceuticals and all kinds of junk. So we want to get fluoride, chlorine, right? All this stuff. We want to get most of it out as best we can. There's all kinds of reverse osmosis. There's point of entry. So your filters that when water enters your home, it covers you for your showers, to your bathtubs, to your sinks and taps, to whatever can be covered through these point of entry filters. There's carbon filtration. There's a lot of them. The one I use at home, I have a countertop 4 liter, does about 4 liters at a time. It's just a distiller. But what I do is I remineralize that distilled water. If it's reverse osmosis, I put in a couple of pinches of sea salt, some trace minerals, so it's useful water to my body because there's more to it than just H2O. But here's what we have to consider. If you have no options, I think a distiller, at least in my experience, is one of the safest, easiest things, and frankly, most affordable. A couple $100 for a really nice one. If you don't have it, you can honestly, like jerry rig one at home and boil water on your stove if you needed to, right? It's like there's ways to do it. But honestly, I couldn't tell you the difference in the water structure and how beneficial it is or is not between reverse osmosis, carbon filtering, distillation. The best I can tell you is this: make sure you have a clean water source and make sure you're adding a pinch of sea salt, rock salt, some kind of trace minerals or something to remineralize that water after it's been treated, and you're already 99% better than everybody else.
Yeah, I
That's a
think that's
simple
important,
right?
and we also distill with part of that process is distillation because I think if I see what's at the bottom of my distiller, it's crazy, here in South Africa and beyond. So taking that water and then ensuring at least you're adding minerals, I think is fundamentally important. What about, air filters and we using it in our home and we recommend it here at the practice, trying to use, high quality air filters, checking, that it's not too dry. We live like high above sea levels, it can get very dry with humidity. We use a hygrometer. How important is air? We speak about clean air, clean food, clean water as a really, really important triad.
Mhm.
How important is the clean air?
Extraordinarily. Here's the thing about air. It's something we breathe in about a swimming pool worth of air every single day. And if you look at what's actually in your air filters, I'm sure you got air filters at home. When you pull those out at the end of the week or the month, whenever you change them, look how filthy it is.
Mm,
It's full of dust and dirt, possibly mold, right? All kinds of stuff that we don't want to be breathing in. According to the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, I forget if it's top three or top five, but indoor recycled air is a top three or top five toxin for humans
sure.
because we're breathing recycled indoor air. Our windows are closed. We're inside. We were, again, never meant to breathe in all this junk. We were meant to be outside. So air filter is important. Absolutely. Can you also simply open up your windows and it's probably just fine, depending on where you live? Also, yes. Now, if you're in like downtown Shanghai, maybe you need some air filters because maybe your outdoor air is not that clean. Los
Mm,
Angeles, right? There's smog over the city. So depending on where you live, but most people can get away with just opening their windows.
okay. All right, that's cool. In terms of like biohacking, like infrared saunas or cold plunges or peptides, the use of peptides or anything you're sort of doing that's been really promising with your clients and patients?
Yeah. So biohacking, right, being the term of taking our biology and accelerating it beyond what would be kind of considered normal. Red light therapy, great, but also can you go into the sun 20, 30 minutes a day? Yes. Earthing, grounding mats, these earthing bed sheets. Can you also just go barefoot in the grass? Yes. But we know there are these benefits. If you live in a high rise in New York, yeah, get the earthing. If you have a house in the suburbs, go put it on a lawn chair and work outside on your laptop today, for example, right? There's different ways to be doing it based on your current circumstance. They're all very important things. I don't put a ton of focus on the biohacking side of things until we're really, let's say, optimizing somebody. Do I need them moving and exercising and doing basics now and getting sunlight? Yes. But if you're, again, bigger fish to fry, if your only time and resource or your financial resources can only extend right now to dealing with mold or parasites or whatever it is, we have to deal with that first. But definitely in the way of optimizing health, these are all amazing things. We
Mm,
can get into red light saunas. That can be a very heavy detox for somebody who may not be able to handle it. So start slow, for example. If you're somebody coming in using peptides, also very beneficial. But the problem is, I look at peptides like I do any sort of supplement. If you are using it to manage symptoms, right? TB 500, BPC 157, your KPVs, there's all kinds of peptides we can use to manage and modulate your immune pathways, boost repair and tissue, or even what's called angiogenesis, which is the development of blood vessels to repair your gut lining. They're all great peptides. Any kind of supplement, whether it's a peptide to a vitamin to an herb, if you're using it to manage your symptoms, it's a plant-based medication, just like pharmaceuticals manage your symptoms. So for those who are actively in a flare, who are actively dealing with a big issue or very circumstantially may benefit from it, I might use peptides just to get over a hump. But even that, like BPC, incredible peptide, BPC 157 for your gut. But the problem we find that we've now seen some research after 2 to 3 months, it can actually negatively impact these healing loops, these positive or negative feedback loops your body has. It can lead to overdevelopment of scar tissue or under healing mechanisms. Your body can't heal the same anymore. So they have to be very therapeutically dosed under supervision. So are they beneficial? Yes. Is it circumstantial? Yes. Are there risks involved in all the above? Even a basic liver tonic? Yes. So all these things circumstantially have their place. And I think if we understand that it's kind of like having tools to build a house, right? If you give me a hammer for long enough, everything looks like a nail. Doesn't mean I can smash them all into the right place. And so no matter what you're taking, what tool you have, it has to be circumstantial. It has to be very intentional.
mm,
Otherwise, again, you can make yourself very, very sick.
yeah. All right, just the last question in terms of health coaching and getting a community around people. How important has that been with regards to your own business and clinic? Because I find a lot of people are isolated, and yeah, in Africa, it's difficult for people. There's not forums or groups where people get together, share stories, encourage one another. It does happen online, but I don't think it's the same as really getting in person. So, what's your view of, group work, group dynamics, or even doing, having a health coach to help you along the journey?
I do a lot of my coaching with my clients in small groups, three, four, five people. There's a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of people really enjoy that, but there's also an education component. Me, I want to try to get you healthy and get you out of my practice, so to speak, as quickly as I can, which also means educating you along the way. So if I've got four people in a group, we're meeting one time a week together, everybody's got their individual programs. It's all custom built for you. So it's not just a big powwow, but you get to listen and learn. So Steve, what's going on today? What's working? What's not? You took this supplement, you felt this. Here's what it means. I want to try this now, and here's what we're expecting. If you feel ABC, let me know. And you can listen now as a viewer and listen and go, okay, this is what happened to Steve. That's interesting. I should bring that up about me. And it builds a skill set for you as well as a client so that when these things may come up in the future or may not, or maybe you want or need more help after your time with us, you're more equipped to be self-sufficient. And that's a reason I do groups. But if a group isn't well controlled, it can also be a cesspool. Two great examples. I've got a group on Facebook called IBD Support and Solutions, about 14, 15,000 people in that group. And it's a great group for the most part. But I only joined that group. I was actually given, I don't know what headship is that the word I'm looking for, but to moderate that group only 5 years ago, maybe. And it's taken almost 5 years to change the culture. I came in, you're trash, you're garbage. I still get DMs in my inboxes today. You're everything that's wrong with the world. F you. You should be ashamed of yourself, because people don't understand there's another perspective. And once you challenge what they think they already know, they get very, very upset. Another example, right? I've now changed the culture nearly successfully. There's still always going to be somebody coming in and goes, oh, this is dumb. It's not for me. That's fine. But most of this community now goes, actually, have you looked at root causes? Actually, have you seen more? There's a lot of people who don't know that stuff exists. On Reddit, I have been banned from the ulcerative colitis and the Crohn's groups on Reddit, which have tens of thousands of people. And I'll tell you what for. Number one, I went in and said, I never said, hey, you can work with me. I'm not self-promoting. I did get banned. Somebody asked about a podcast. I have one that's self-promoting, so that's fine. But on the other hand, I said, hey, here's my interpretation of the research. Here's what I see. Here's the PubMed IDs. Here's the articles. Here's the link. Here's my interpretation. And this is just a different way of considering it. And it's actually shown really beneficial in many cases. And here's the case studies. Banned. And the reason that was cited is that you moderate a group that has different views and we don't agree with it. And so what's happening now is these communities on Reddit, for example, are now gatekeeping any kind of help or therapy from those who could be getting a different perspective, who could be identifying root causes, because in their eyes, natural is dangerous, or there's
Mhm.
no root cause, or it's random, or I've been told it's genetic, which again is not. I have the data to back that up. I've been told it's autoimmune, therefore there's no cure because my doctor said so. So communities can be great, but they can also pigeonhole you if you're in the wrong ones. You have to be very careful.
Brilliant. Sure. Community is important, but obviously the people that you trust and that you connect with are fundamentally important. In fact, I don't do many of these communities and forums online. I just find people can't read you, they don't get to know you, they don't know your body language, they don't trust you. So in person for me, but you know what, everybody's got to find their space, and sometimes an online forum can be very helpful for a lot of people. Just give a message of hope. I mean, and I've been a physician for so long here. I've seen chronic disease just increase, and it just seems like big food is. And I know things are changing in the States, but I can tell you, we had Zach Bush come. He's been on the podcast. South Africa is the number one user of glyphosate per
Yeah.
capita above the USA. We
Wow.
are not, we don't have the RFK Jr., pumping health and wellness here. We are a third world country with third world means in many ways. There's no regulation. There's no such thing as the FDA checking things. It's almost the wild, wild west here, which can get very, very tricky. But tell us just the way of the future with regards to, gastric issues, stomach issues, and IBS and IBD, because there are many days, that I've had to just say to my wife, look, I need therapy. I've gone for therapy. I've got compassion fatigue because we've just never seen the distress that we've seen with people. Where do you see it going in the future? And maybe the next 5 years is not so good, and maybe it's going to take 10 years, but it just seems like there are so many people and too few practitioners that are helping people.
I'd like to say I'm cautiously optimistic. And the reason for that is the world seems to be going in a downward spiral. It all seems like a facade. It all seems like, well, we're going to make everybody healthy again. I love the Maha movement in the States. I think it's
Mm,
incredible. Make America healthy again. That sounds awesome. But the rate at which things go, the levels of bureaucracy, things take a long time. Right? Even banning food dyes, right? The FDA, they've been allowing this stuff for decades. They don't care, right? It's only when they're told they have to care, otherwise there's penalty, that they start to care. But it's all, again, big food, big pharma, insurance companies, FDA. You look at CEOs go from one thing to another. So I've been very pessimistic. I am cautiously optimistic about the future, but here's what I can say. Currently, and this is per the studies, when something new comes out, a new study, say we said, hey, we've proven it, we've shown it, we've identified one root cause of IBD, and there's a cure now. Cool. That sounds really nice. On average, it would take 17 years to go from published literature to common knowledge. And then after that, I imagine another 10 years plus for it to actually disseminate down for doctors to really begin using it. You're 30 years before this comes common practice. So even if we say there's change coming tomorrow, you're 17 to 25, 30 years away from maybe your doctor understanding it. So regardless of whether we're optimistic or pessimistic about the future, I will say this. Nobody cares about your health more than you do. If you have IBS, IBD, and you're hearing this now, and you're like, man, this is making sense. I don't want to say I'm here to scare you straight, but in a way I kind of am. No one's going to care about your health except for you. In the USA, healthcare, or I should say sick care more correctly, is the most profitable industry in the world. They are less than 5% of the globe, and they make up nearly 70% of the world's pharmaceutical profits. It is an industry. It is a business. And Martin Shkreli, who was the fall guy for Big Pharma for a long time, was on record saying, we are not in the business of curing people. We're in the business of making money. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. And
yeah.
that is medicine in a nutshell. So regardless of whether the future of the system is for better or for worse, you're ultimately in charge of your life and your outcomes. And it's up to you to take that step forward because nobody's going to do it for you.
Well, what a great way to finish on. Just declare absolute favor and blessing over you, Josh, that you would rise further into your calling with much courage and just tell people where they can find you because I think it would be important to connect with you.
Yeah, easiest way if you want to find me. We do have clients all over the world, including South Africa. You
Mm.
can find everything you need from social to podcast, the works at Gut Solution, all singular, gutsolution.ca. I've got two podcasts out. There's one called Reversing Crohn's and Colitis Naturally. It's all my talks and trainings on how this works and the root causes, how to get there. We've got Reversible as well as another podcast we've got. And of course, you can find me across social media. All of it is Josh Dech. That's DECH dot health. But again, if you're like, dude, that's a lot of things to remember, just head to gutsolution.ca for Canada, and all the links for everything is easily accessible on the website.